You know that moment when someone tells you something that sounds totally unrealistic, but a tiny part of you hopes they're right? Like when a friend swears they got 6 free months of rent by saying one magic phrase to their landlord, or when someone says they accidentally lost weight by switching to sparkling water. You hear it? You raise an eyebrow, but you're also a little curious. That's what the first $100,000 is like. Everybody talks about it like it's some mythic rite of passage, the financial version of leveling up in a video game. Charlie Munger famously said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it." And for a lot of people, that's exactly how it feels. Hard, slow, frustrating. Like you're pushing a boulder uphill with a blindfold on. But here's the twist most people never realize until they cross that line. The first $100,000 feels impossible, until suddenly, it isn't. And once it clicks, once you see how the machine actually works, you realize something strange. It was never about the money. It was about what the process turns you into. Today, I want to take you into that shift, that psychological turning point, the internal rewiring that happens between having $1,000 and having $100,000. Because the real story isn't just how you get there. It's why the journey feels so different from what comes after. And why, truly, your first $100,000 is easier than you think. Not because the numbers are small, but because the world quietly stacks the odds in your favor once you know what to look for. I want to start with a simple observation. Most people don't realize how money actually grows. Not the way it grows in the TikTok influencer version of reality, where you start a side hustle selling glow-in-the-dark dog bowls and somehow make $20,000 a month. I mean, how money grows in the real, boring, stubbornly predictable way. If you've ever seen a compound interest curve, you know it has two phases, the crawl and the climb. The crawl is where it feels like nothing's happening. You save, you invest, you wait, and the numbers barely move. It's like pushing a car in neutral. You're putting in all this effort, but the car just sort of rolls. But the climb, that's where things tilt. That's where the math starts helping you, instead of just observing you from a distance. The mistake people make is assuming the climb comes after you're rich, after you've hit 500K or 1 million. But that's not true. The climb actually starts somewhere around the 30K to 100K mark. That's the zone where compound interest stops being theoretical and starts being noticeable. It's when the curve quietly changes shape, but you only see that once you're in it. Before that, everything feels flat. And that flatness, that emotionally dead, painfully slow beginning, that's the part that tricks people into quitting. Because your brain is wired for linear progress. It wants to see the amount of effort you put in match the amount of progress you get out. But compound growth is the exact opposite. You put in maximum effort and get almost nothing in return at first. Then you put in much less effort later, and the results explode. So the first $100,000? It's not a money problem. It's a psychology problem. Let me tell you a story that explains this perfectly. A few years ago, I had a friend, smart guy, analytical, one of those people who reads the entire user manual before turning on a TV. He decided he wanted to get serious about his finances. So he created a spreadsheet, a massive one. It had tabs, it had formulas. It had color-coded projections that predicted what day, down to the hour, he'd hit each financial milestone. He was obsessed. For the first 6 months, he was a machine. No eating out, no Uber unless it was raining. No, I deserve this Amazon purchases. He stuck to his budget like it was a religion. But after those 6 months, he was done, completely burned out. Why? Because after 6 months of discipline, sacrifice, and a near-monk lifestyle, his net worth had barely moved, maybe a few $1,000s, and he felt like an idiot. He told me, "Dude, if this is the rate I'm going to grow, I'm going to be 80 before I get anywhere." But that wasn't true at all. He wasn't seeing slow results because he was failing. He was seeing slow results because that's how this stage always feels. It's the silent stage, the invisible stage, the "why am I doing this" stage. The part nobody tells you about because it's not sexy and it doesn't look good on Instagram. But here's the wild part. 2 years later, after he kept going, he hit 100K almost exactly when his spreadsheet predicted. But by then, the discipline wasn't painful anymore. His habits weren't new. They were automatic. And when he looked back, his reaction surprised him. His words were, "I thought the hardest part was saving money, but the hardest part was believing the boring stuff would work." And that's the shift almost everyone who hits 100K experiences. You start out thinking the challenge is external. How much you make, how much things cost, how much you can save. But the real battle happens internally. It's the story you tell yourself about money long before the numbers reflect anything. Now, I want to explain something that most people never hear. Your first 100K is a psychological transformation disguised as a financial milestone. Think about it. To get there, you have to learn how to control your impulses. You have to learn patience. You have to learn basic investing. You have to learn how to delay gratification. You have to learn how to separate what you want today from what you want this decade. But once you've learned those things, once they're baked into your identity, maintaining them becomes easy. And that's why the climb gets faster. It's not because you magically become rich. It's because your mindset switches to the version of you capable of getting rich. Let me put it this way. Imagine there are two versions of you. Version A is you without 100K. You're trying to figure things out. You're second-guessing yourself. You're wondering if you should switch strategies every 30 days because you saw a YouTube video about dividend ETFs or crypto staking or starting a Shopify store selling cat hammocks. Version B is you after 100K. This version of you isn't wondering. They've seen how the game works. They know compound interest is real. Not because someone told them, but because they've watched it happen in their own account. They've seen their money make money. They've seen bad markets recover. They've seen consistency pay off. Version B is calmer, more patient, more confident, and that version of you makes better decisions almost automatically. This is why the first $100,000 is easier than people think. Not because it doesn't take work, but because the hardest work is front-loaded. Once you cross that psychological tipping point, everything after becomes a continuation rather than a struggle. Now, let's talk about something else that nobody warns you about. The invisible forces helping you during those early stages. Because even though it feels like you're pushing a boulder uphill, you actually have a few huge advantages you don't fully appreciate yet. First, your expenses are usually lower earlier in life. Even if you don't feel that way, even if rent seems insane and groceries feel like luxury items, the reality is most people have fewer major financial responsibilities before they hit 100K than after. You might not have a mortgage yet. You might not have kids yet. You might not be supporting aging parents yet. You might not be paying for the house repairs that magically appear every 3 minutes once you buy a home. Those things are coming, and they're expensive. But right now, you're relatively flexible. You can adjust. You can pivot. You have fewer anchors weighing down your financial ship. Second, your lifestyle is naturally simpler. Maybe not by choice, maybe by necessity. But that simplicity is actually a massive advantage. Once your income rises, lifestyle creep moves fast. You start justifying nicer things. You start saying, it's only $30 more, a lot. Before you know it, your expenses grow into whatever size your income allows. But when your income is smaller, you're forced into efficiency. You naturally learn how to live below your means because you don't have a choice yet. And that muscle becomes your superpower later. Third, momentum compounds. Before money compounds. People underestimate how powerful it is to just have forward motion. Even if the numbers are small, even if you're only saving $150 a month, the psychological effect is enormous. It creates identity alignment. You stop saying, I want to save, and you start saying, I'm a saver. You stop saying, I'm trying to invest, and you start saying, I invest. That identity shift is worth far more than the dollars themselves, because it's the thing that keeps you going long enough to hit the threshold where money starts helping you. Fourth, the beginning forces you to solve your biggest financial challenge early, your behavior. If you're making $40,000 a year and you're managing to save money, guess what happens when you're making $100,000 a year? Saving becomes nearly automatic. But if you don't figure out your habits early, if you're constantly stressed, constantly spending, constantly making emotional financial decisions, your income won't save you. In fact, a higher income can make your bad habits even more expensive. So, yes, the beginning feels slow, but the beginning is also the part where you set up the systems that make everything after easier. Now I want to talk about something most people misunderstand: the relationship between income and the first 100K. People assume the first 100K is all about increasing your income. And yes, income matters, but it matters less at the beginning than you think. Here's why. The first 100K is mostly built from your behavior. The second 100K is built from your income. The third 100K is built from your investments. That means the first stage, your stage, is the one where discipline matters most. You're defining the rules for your future life, and every decision you make compounds in ways you can't see yet. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine you start saving $300 a month. That's not nothing, but it's also not an extreme number. It's the cost of eating out a few times or a couple impulsive Amazon packages. If you invest that $300 every month at a modest 7%, something interesting happens. You don't hit 100K quickly at all. It takes years, slow, boring, uneventful years. But somewhere around year 8 or 9, the curve starts bending. Suddenly your account grows faster, not because you changed, but because your money started doing the heavy lifting. And here's the best part. Once you hit 100K, the next 100K takes about half the time. Why? Because now you're not alone anymore. Your money is working with you instead of watching from the sidelines. This is the psychological shift I want you to understand. The first $100,000 is the point where you stop pushing the snowball, and it starts rolling on its own. But that shift only happens if you stay consistent long enough to reach it.